Thank you.
Give a big hand.
Everybody, so we'll start with a short background. Tina and I have a very colorful background coming from exploration. And then we just move over to a short video about what we are doing over at our rocket lab in California. And then we finish with actual speech, which will be about that revolution that happens within space right now, especially for beyond the billionaires. What's going on? Tina and I are explorers. We climbed Mount Everest, went 4 times to Mount Everest. And here we are in Icefall. That's Tina with some frostbites in her face. And then we also sailed from Europe to South America in our own boat. And we skied to the North Pole and we skied to the South Pole back to back. We have a couple of Guinness Book of Records for all this stuff.
Not for eating hot dogs. All our expeditions were unsupported and usually involved just the 2 of us. Why is this interesting? Well, because this is the same strategy that we are now bringing with us into space. So our inspiration are the old explorers, the Amundsen, the Cook, the Leif Erikson, right? They all went very light and in very small teams. And so what we are building right now is a spacefaring system that is much smaller than that of NASA and SpaceX. And in the following video that we're going to show you now, you're going to see the part of our shop, part of our team, and some of the test firings that we have done up until now.
Okay, let's see if we can get that playing. It's just a tiny speaker over there.
So that was our garage. This is our test stand. What's unusual with us is that we have it's mobile. Usually it's fixed. In army bases, ours is mobile. We just take it 10 minutes out into the desert, and that's where we do our tests. Why? Because it saves a lot of money, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of time, of course. That's me running to Tom.
And this is our first engine we made, and it's a full-scale production engine that can be used on a rocket. We'll have 9 of those on our first stage. And the force of one engine is the equivalent of 2 Formula 1 race cars.
Pressurizing the units, filling up the propellant by hand. We actually even make our own propellant in our space, which is unusual. And we are very nervous here. It's our first engine. We don't know, is it going to hold up at all? Is something going to happen? That's a little bit toxic. So we were, of course, extremely happy. This was the fastest that anyone had gone from design just hit 2 successful hottest out of an engine. So that's why we are hugging, despite of Corona.
Yeah, don't do this in a time of COVID, but we're kind of the same family.
And that is the engine, that's our core team, that's our engine in the middle there. So this is our shop, this is our town. Half is cowboys and half is literally Indians. We're on a reservation. Yeah.
So we have 300 square meters where we developed the rocket, and then across the street we have another 200 square meters for our machine park. We have CNC machines, so we can build anything from scratch.
We build everything from scratch right now. We don't plan to do that in the future, but right now we want to be on top of the entire step, of every step in the process.
It's also great to be able to just go from CAD to manufacturing, bam, straight away.
We work very, very fast compared to what's going on. That's Steph, she's our chemist. And putting together in the first propellant tank. That is Kaya, he likes Steph. And this is our lab. So we also have a biohacking lab where we actually do a lot of experiments preparing for the human part of the space travel, right? The brittle bones, radiations, things like that. So we basically hack cells. That's Sam. They were discussing the engine. We work a lot in computers. Everything we do in computers first. So it's not, yeah, go ahead.
And engine is parametric, which means you have to do all the math for every single curve. And that's the Laval nozzle we are using.
Swedish nozzle, right?
Of course, it's not only CAD, it's also the analytics,
These are
which
water
is
tests
pretty
that we
amazing.
do before we put propellant to it, just to make sure that everything spreads out evenly, because that's what we're going to need the propellants to meet and ignite on contact. That's the rocket. Our first rocket, Eiger.
It's 12 meter high and 1.1 meter in diameter.
This is the test stand. We threw it up in the computer before even we built it. Now, of course, to this comes keeping in contact with the industry. What's going on when it comes to the law? What's going on when it comes to our competitors? Where is the money? The satellites, what's going on there?
Military.
That was a military woman that we had in the big. We're going to touch on this a little bit more during the actual talk. There's a big demand. Lots of satellites are going to go up right now, most of them small. And that's what's going to involve all of you guys, because this is the infrastructure that you're going to need to build. The Stapa Launch Challenge, big competition. We were one of the finalists. That's our rocket again. It's me, that. We work a lot with materials. We have one Indian team working with us about nanotechnology, but we also look to nature. Like, for instance, shells can be very strong if you apply a load in a certain way.
Welding is a huge part of building a rocket.
So
Okay.
now, you saw the big fire, now we need to control it, see if we can make it into small, thin laser.
It was uncontrolled, the first one.
This one is controlled. Again, we don't know what's going to happen. There we go. That's what we want. So you see, now we took the big dragon and we put him in just this small focused jet. You can see how much sand it actually picks up. That's the force in this one. And as Tom said, we're going to have 10 of those on our first rocket. That's the afterburn.
And yeah.
So that's that.
Okay, and being part of one of those is just as exciting as standing on the summit of Mount Everest. So, can you guys see good, or should we move?
I feel like we're in your way.
Yeah.
It's the table that's in the way. But,
Can we
Well,
move it?
There are more chairs here.
Like that?
that's okay. That's perfect.
Don't fall down.
I'm on my toes right now. So Pythom Space is that classical story about David and Goliath. And we're a small team, as you can see, building a rocket at the foot of Sierra Nevada. And from there we are challenging NASA and SpaceX. And we are halfway there.
And we're halfway there. So how can we be halfway there? But the reason, as most of you know here, is a new technology that didn't exist 20 years ago, even actually 10 years ago, right? If we start with the internet, we have today access to ancient patterns from the dawn of the internet, from the space age. We have papers written in the 50s and 60s, empirical tests ranging of everything from rocket propellants to materials. And these are tests that would take our team months, even years, actually, to replicate. If there's something we don't understand, of course, we have the world's best teachers. We are talking Stanford, MIT, on Google, supporting us, everything at no cost. This is truly an amazing new world, guys, that we are experiencing right now. And we got to experience it very intimately during our expedition Silicon Valley, that we call it, 5 years that we spent there, got to know it. And this is a big reason behind our success today.
This is Stanford, by the way.
Yeah.
Beautiful university.
To this come, of course, the computer themselves. We use those in every step of the process. You see a lot of hardware there, but we would say that building a rocket is actually 80% software. For instance, to do calculation of trajectories. In the old days, this would take a whole room filled of mathematicians 1 month to accomplish. Today, we write a software for this. We design the entire rocket on our computers. We run it in analytics, and then the computers drive the machines that actually manufacture the parts for us. Just for an example, so Pythom is today one of the few rocket companies actually making our own engines. The others actually mostly buy, they order it, usually from Ukraine. We didn't know you could do that. So we made our own. So our engine is called Asterix, and it is what is called regeneratively cooled. And this is a technology that actually took SpaceX 5 years to apply on their first Falcon. So what does this mean? Well, when you see the engine burning, it actually reaches the temperature that is 60% of the surface of the sun. So how do you prevent it from melting while you're firing it, right? Well, regeneratively cooled process means that you're using the actual propellant for that. And the way you accomplish that is that you build the engine with 2 double walls, and between them snakes hundreds of channels that direct your propellant in a very exact way for the combustion and the cooling to be able to happen at the same time. There's a lot of mathematics involved in this because this has to be very, very exact. And again, we throw computers on this, testing this virtually before we actually get the engine out into the harshness of the real world. Yeah, there's the
computational
how we are
fluid
testing
dynamics
it.
test.
And then we're going to show the engine before and
In the real
after.
world.
So this is before and this is after ignition.
We could say it's hell cleaning that afterwards. But it's
We use
doable.
interns for that.
So the material of this engine is Inconel, which is a super alloy of nickel and chromium. And actually this Inconel material was used on the Apollo lunar lander 60 years ago. So that's kind of exciting. But in those days, it required the highest craftsmanship to actually build one of these engines. It took months and even years. And today we 3D print it in one day.
That's the difference. That's what we can see.
You 3D printed that nozzle and that.
Yes, and here we have actually 3 engines. All
The
these
entire
are-
engine, with all the channels inside, with the pintle inside. Yeah.
It's just so this is basically the whole engine is just one single part, and so this kind of instant people ask why is it so small? Well, it's actually exactly 31 centimeters, and the reason is because that's what's fitted in this specific
Printer.
3D printer. We made 9 of them.
Instead of 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gets cheaper. All right.
So here's some action. So this image shows what happened just a split second after ignition, is so-called hypergolic reaction, which means that the propellants will, when they meet each other, ignite immediately.
We don't need a match or a lighter to achieve that.
And here is a 10-second time lapse. We pre-burn, the burn, and the actual afterburn. So we are not alone. We're not the only ones. It's 13 of us, exactly 13, around the world in our class.
Building a rocket, in our class,
And these classes are decided by how much you can bring up to space. In our case, we decided to aim for 150 kilo or less to orbit. And there is a miniaturization of technology in everything, including the satellites, and that's exploding the number of satellites we see in the next 10 years. And there are 60,000 satellites planned right now. And 80% of those satellites will be in this small category. Actually, the last quarter, 97% of all the satellites sent up was less than 500 kilo. So this is happening faster. Yeah. As example, DARPA has a big project called Blackjack, and they put their satellites, they position them at 110 kilo.
So it's pretty cheap today to fly with SpaceX. It brings a number of problems though. The 2 main being is that number 1, you have to ride with others. That means that you have to arrange your schedule towards the schedule of the bigger clients. And the second problem is that you are going to be clustered with them when it comes to trajectories. You cannot choose where you want to be positioned yourself. And Where you put your satellites is today a pretty important competitive advantage against the others. So what Python offers is its own engine to those small and often underprivileged.
Its own rocket, yeah.
Its own rocket
Yeah.
to those small and often underprivileged customers. So where SpaceX is a bus, Python actually becomes a space Uber.
And this is kind of interesting because this price level means that a university like Chalmers or KTH would probably be able to pick up the bill for this themselves.
So the market, guys.
Well, there we have the bus and sorry.
8 minute delay, Mars. So the market for this easy access, what it's called, when we have a lot of small rockets going up cheaply, that market is absolutely sizzling today. And this is made evident in the valuation of our friends, competitors here. This is the valuation they had even before flying. This, of course, includes Pythom Space. We are today valued at $28 million after just 1 year of development. Some compare this with the internet, of course. The truth to be told, this even blows the internet completely out of the waters. Our valuation is, in fact, even lower still than many of our competitors here. So one of the largest VC funds in Silicon Valley are called Khosla Ventures. And they invested not long ago $28 million in a small rocket space company from New Zealand, you see it there, called Rocket Lab. Now this is funny, because this company was actually started by a guy who couldn't even land an internship at Boeing some 10 years ago. So how did it go for Khosla with this loser, right? Well, Rocket Lab is today worth $5 billion. And this guy who couldn't even land a cheap, free job a while ago, he could now actually buy all of the Saab airspace and still have, what,
10 billion kronor left. So,
that you play with.
you know, Saab airspace is valued to about 3 billion.
So a couple of years ago, DARPA, which is a Defense Advanced Research Project in the United States, they launched a competition to design a rocket that was so light, that was so simple that you would be able to launch it anytime from anywhere. So imagine you build a rocket that you can build from outside here, from the entrance, tomorrow, to go any orbit of your choice. That was the challenge. Out of 50 entrants from all over the world, DARPA chose 10 finalists, and Python was one of them. It was a very James Bond moment. Nobody won this challenge, so it's still there.
We're still working on it.
Yeah. But Astra, and this is interesting, Astra that you see up here, they were one of our co-competitors, and they have since raised $800 million and are now valued $2 billion. Here's what's interesting with them. They have yet to send anything to orbit, and they have actually crashed 4 times already in attempts. And this haven't put even a dent in their valuation. In fact, out of all these rocket companies, only Rocket Lab has flown to orbit yet, and still you see the same valuations all over the picture here. This shows just the urgency of the demand for small rockets out there.
So KPMG, the global accounting company, they interviewed business people, politicians, and space companies about the future. And they predicted that the leading space companies of 2030 would be the present startups. And that these startups would, within 10 years, lead the whole space economy and dominate it, actually.
So that's you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of us would actually be valued 2 billions and be multinational.
2 billions.
2 billions.
Billions of dollars, yeah.
And the valuation of new rocket companies beats everything today. It beats wheat.
Which is actually doing really great on that.
Yeah. biopharma and 3D printing, everything. Rockets are number one. This, however, oh, there we go. This, however, is not true for old launch companies or all rocket companies. It's only applicable to new launcher companies.
You see the difference there? 1-to-1 on the old companies, and the valuations on the new ones 1-to-100. It's absolutely crazy.
And I just want to add a little thing, and if you think this is weird, think about what happened with SpaceX. Boeing hardly exists anymore in space. NASA hardly exists. They don't send up anything anymore. SpaceX took it all.
The astronauts even ride Teslas out to the,
Yeah.
to the launch pad. So, this makes it easy to understand why two of the world's richest men actually now invest everything they got in space. Jeff Bezos even actually dropped Amazon to go all in. The analysts that Tom is talking about, they say that the world's first trillionaire is going to be made in space. And that competition has already started, more or less actually in secret. The battle, guys, is for the new dream that can be comparable with Columbus' discovery of the American continent. But this time we are heading for a new world on an infinite scale. Right? Incredible treasures await even before we have left the moon. This is called the cislunar space, which we are looking at here. And this is just between us and the moon. There are rocks. Right now we know about 20,000 of them that carry minerals and metals that we actually risk to be running out of on this earth within the next 50 to 100 years. One of these rocks has all the platinum that we have mined on earth throughout our entire history. Other has iron, nickel, and cobalt. And you know how important cobalt is right now with the GPUs that we can't get to the cards. All of that we have out there in some of the rocks that will last us at least for 3,000 years. So we are talking zinc, tin, silver, copper, lead, metals that we may run out of, all right now circle right above our heads, guys. They are easier to reach than the moon, and the value of them is absolutely unfathomable.
And end of fossil fuels is closing upon us, definitely. And space-based solar power, solar panels placed in space that actually beam down the energy. That's it's an old idea, but it's happening right now. China is pushing for this and working actively on it. They have 2 stations coming up. And then we have, whoever can solve this technology, of course, will give the Earth absolutely unlimited energy to the end of time, basically. And that's something for Greta probably as well to think about, you know. Caltech University has been supported by the real estate tycoon family Brand with $100 million. I'm going to repeat that, $100 million to the university, earmarked only for solar panel research in space, only in space. And they are sending up their first test plant already next year.
So, when you don't have to fight the weight of an entire planet, this changes physics and opens a range of new possibilities. For instance, crystals can line up in perfect rows, which gives us superior materials and also medical drugs. You guys probably know that we are right now 3D printing organs here on Earth, where the problem with gravity is that those organs actually collapse on themselves. This is a problem we don't have in space. And so right now, actually, on ISS, on the space station, they are working on a retina. Retina are the light sensors in the back of our eyes. This disease is today incurable and it's blinding. So right now, when you lose those rods, you're gone, you're going to be blind. But on the ISS right now, they are actually building one of those retinas just now. Space pharma, yeah, another thing. All these tests, they are actually sent up in very small test tubes, which shows again the urgent need for small and cheap rockets. Space pharma is really interesting, especially to me. And Parkinson's diseases that we really don't have anything for today. So it's a very exciting market. The fact is that, space is applicable, and I think there was somebody here who talked about that today. It affects many areas that we haven't thought of previously. And there's a female investor on NASDAQ right now. Her name is Kathy Wood. And she's investing right now, and very successfully so, in what appeared to be completely unrelated markets. One such thing is excavators. So why is that? Well, because engineers working on designing excavators for the mining of asteroids already are rethinking. Oh, really? Good. Okay. I thought you were one of them. Are right now already rethinking how excavators are actually designed back on Earth.
So these space resources, they have been talked about for a long time. So how do we know it will happen now? Isn't it just science fiction? Well, the answer is that this time we don't longer have any choice. China has already said they will dominate space, and they are building on this stuff right now. And they have actually caught up with the United States when it comes to launches every year. So this is a pretty interesting, this is 2020, pretty interesting launch image. And you can see China, US, Russia, and then to the right,
New Zealand.
half the size of Sweden, and they already are number 4 when it comes to number of launches. We could be there, or terrible thought, Norway. Who is not in there?
Look at that, you guys. Europe. Where is Europe?
Europe.
Europe, all of Europe is beaten by New Zealand. Okay, so so the thing is, we're also dependent on space technology today, that we can't fall behind, and that is also true about small countries. Swedish Space Agency, they just did a report, and they show that Sweden is actually lagging behind the world in space investments. We're going the wrong way right now, and we have to stop that. That has to be changed. There are now huge investments going on by nations, private investors, and by military as well in space. And whoever is investing most and leading today will lead the whole world tomorrow because of the space investment.
So, as you know, in the United States, we got the Space Force. Is that the next picture, Tom?
Yeah.
And the Space Force's only purpose is to protect commercial interests in space. So it is not to protect the Earth. In 2015, the US Congress passed a new law that is called the Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act. And this law guarantees American launch companies like SpaceX and Pythom the right to minerals and water that we extract from celestial bodies such as the asteroids. Japan, Luxembourg, and UAE, United Arab Emirates, already introduced similar laws, and we really hope that Sweden will soon follow suit.
So back to where we started. Pythom is a complete space transportation system, which means we have rockets, spaceship, and landers that will work on the moon, Mars, and the asteroids. We have a unique propulsion system, and it uses the same engines and the same fuel throughout a space mission. And this is very unusual, and we are the only ones doing it today. But we think that's a key to lightweight expedition through our solar system. Lightweight expedition.
And here are actually the first pictures of our first propellant tank. You raised it last week in the US. It's 1.5 meters tall. It's going to hold our propellant, one of our propellants, nitric acid. And of course, our team is still there in the United States, and they are going to start working in a couple of hours.
Hopefully.
I hope, yeah.
So I just want to add there that this holds 4,500 kilo of nitric acid. How much do you think the weight of the tank is? 50 kilo. That's how light
That's
we
a
build
challenge, yeah.
everything.
It's extremely lightweight. We're using a special laser for this that was developed for reparations on the space shuttle.
So we have also just kicked off operations in Sweden, and where we are starting to develop AI for attitude control in Stockholm. An attitude control that's steering of the rocket and landers. And this technology for AI is really important, because if you can predict what's going to happen, you will use much less energy, smaller batteries, and so on. And beyond that, the stabilization, we are also doing AI for getting to orbits and for robotic assembly in orbit. So we are right now building 2 copies of the Eagle rocket that will fly next year. And they are from 2 different launch sites. One will be in Alaska, and one will be from Esrange up here in Kiruna. And Eagle will be the first space rocket built by Swedes.
Thank you.